Hi, it's Katrina. My friend David is going to be helping me out with the voiceover today, so I hope you enjoy.
Number 10. Egyptian proof of aliens. The Tully Papyrus is said to be direct evidence of alien life. It was made during the reign of Thutmose III, also known as Thutmose the Great, the sixth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. It was allegedly discovered by Boris de Rashvilts, an Egyptologist. Boris claims he found the text among the belongings of Vatican Museum director Alberto Tully after his death. Boris then made a transcript of what he found on the papyrus, and it was published in newspapers in 1953. Unfortunately, we don't know how much of this is true. Nobody knows exactly where the Tully Papyrus was originally found, although many historians assume it was somewhere in Egypt. The original scrap of papyrus was supposedly kept within the Vatican, but has since vanished. Some believe it's hiding deep in the secret archives and will never be revealed ever again. But what's on this document that makes it so special? The papyrus details a UFO sighting that took place around the year 1480 BC. The Egyptian people witnessed circles of fire, also described as fiery discs, hovering in the sky in mass numbers. This seems to have been a huge event in ancient Egypt. Something happened and the sky was filled with unidentified flying objects. But unfortunately, the only piece of evidence that might confirm the story is gone, likely hiding somewhere in the Vatican. Number 9. Illuminati rituals. The secret society of the Illuminati may just be working out of the Vatican. A woman known only as Svali recently came forward and claimed that she was involved in pagan rituals within the Vatican itself. Svali said that she used to be a member of the Illuminati and saw with her own eyes how the secret organization is intertwined with the church. If what this supposed ex-member says is true, the Illuminati has been part of the church for centuries. She says they perform obscure and unpleasant rituals, secret initiation ceremonies, and so much more. However, she never did reveal the exact details of the kind of satanic activities they take part in. She also was not able to reveal any names of those involved. Either she was making it all up, or she's too scared for her own life to say much more. Number 8. Emmanuella Orlando. Emmanuella Orlando is the biggest modern mystery in Vatican City. The teenager disappeared after having a flute lesson on June 22, 1983. However, that doesn't mean she's gone. Apparently, there have been sightings of the young girl throughout the years, but none of them have been confirmed. As of right now, Emmanuella's disappearance is Italy's most famous unsolved mystery. But what exactly happened? Emmanuella is the daughter of Ercole Orlando, an employee at the Vatican Bank. The school year had just concluded, but Emmanuella was still taking flute lessons 3 times a week in Rome. After her lesson on June 22nd, she phoned her parents to tell them that someone had offered her a job at a cosmetics company and that she would be home late. She was last seen walking away from her usual bus stop and getting into a BMW. We still don't know who was driving that vehicle or what the deal was with the supposed interview she had. None of it was ever confirmed, and the authorities still don't have reliable answers. In May of 2012, interest in the case was renewed, and some strange testimonies came out. Vatican exorcist Father Gabriele Amorth believed the young girl was kidnapped by the Vatican police. He thinks that Emmanuella was abused and then murdered, and it was all covered up by the Vatican. Number 7. The Archives. The Vatican secret archives are made up of over 53 miles, 85 kilometers of shelving. That equates to around 35,000 volumes of historic knowledge. Documents from the past 1200 years and beyond are housed here in the archive, and there is no public index. The Vatican does allow scholars to poke through the documents, but not until they are at least 75 years old. The Vatican waits until its own priests are nearing their final years before allowing them access to their secret fortress library. Nobody knows everything that's inside the secret archives. There are certainly a lot of conspiracy theories. Some believe there are extraterrestrial beings stashed in secret vaults underneath Vatican City. Others think there are official documents proving that Jesus Christ never even existed. As mysterious as the archives are, we do know some of the documents that are stashed here. There's an infamous letter written by Mary, Queen of Scots, before she was executed. She begged for Pope Sixtus V to spare her life, but he didn't intervene and she lost her head in 1587. There are also documents regarding the excommunication of Martin Luther, the man who started Protestantism. And shockingly, a parchment was revealed in 2007 that proved once and for all that the Knights Templar were set up by the King of France and murdered in 1308. This truth had been kept secret in the archives for over 700 years. Number 6. The murder of John Paul I. Pope John Paul I died unexpectedly 33 days after becoming the Pope. He was only 65 years old, was in almost perfect health, and seemed to be in good spirits before his death. The world was quick to start pointing fingers, and people began to cook up conspiracy theories. This was mostly due to the strangeness that happened in the days following his demise. There were inconsistencies in the official story from the Vatican. There were also irregularities in the way the body was treated. To this day, many believe Pope John Paul I was murdered. But who would assassinate the Pope? Some think it was Cardinal Sebastiano Baggio. The cardinal was the main person behind the selection process for new bishops at the Vatican and was a notorious Freemason who worked to appoint only liberal bishops. Shortly after John Paul I came into office, he removed Baggio from his congregation on account of his corruption. It could be that Baggio assassinated John Paul as revenge. There are other theories out there too. Some believe the CIA was involved. Others believe it may have been the Italian mafia in connection with high-level church officials. The theory states there was major fraud going on at the Vatican Bank, and John Paul was going to expose it. To stop the scandal, Vatican officials worked with the mafia in order to keep the Pope quiet for good. What do you think really happened to Pope John Paul I? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 5. Stolen treasures. Some of the best works of art in the world can be found at the Vatican museums. They have items from ancient Egypt, a pavilion full of chariots, and a significant number of artifacts taken from indigenous people around the globe. When Catholic missionaries started exploring new territories in the early 20th century, they discovered heaps of treasure and brought it all back to the Vatican. The valuables were either put on display or stashed securely in some unknown location. The Anima Mundi Ethnological Museum is where a lot of these indigenous artifacts can be found today. It's located conveniently by the Vatican's food court and is home to tens of thousands of items. Everything from primitive masks, animal skins, feathered headdresses, and intricately carved tusks are stashed here. According to the Vatican, they were gifts to Pope Pius XI. He wanted to honor the success of Catholic missionaries who converted indigenous people to the Church. In other words, the Pope wanted to celebrate the cultural destruction and forced religious reformation of natives everywhere from Canada to Australia. Keep in mind, this was the same Pope who had a personal relationship with Adolf Hitler during World War II. It's never been confirmed that Pope Pius XI was a secret Nazi, but we do know that he was communicating with their leader. Pope Pius XI believed Hitler could win the war, and that the Vatican might become a puppet organization of the Third Reich. Recently, Cassidy Caron with the Metis National Council in Canada made a statement regarding the Vatican and their collection of artifacts. Cassidy said the pieces being held in Europe belong to Indigenous Canadians and should be sent back to Canada. However, the Church does not appear willing to give the artifacts back. Number 4. Saint Malachis prophecy. In 1595, a prophecy was published by Arnold Wyon, a Benedictine monk. It wasn't Arnold who had the prophecy, but Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop from the 12th century. Malachy experienced a vision of the future apocalypse. He was on a trip to Rome in 1139, and he wrote down a series of 112 phrases, each one more cryptic than the last. Each phrase described a future pope, with the final pope ruling prior to the end of the world. Ever since, people have been connecting the names of new popes to one of the phrases found in the prophecy. John Paul II was Pope number 110, based on the phrase, "from the labor of the sun," because he happened to be born on a solar eclipse. Pope number 111 was Benedict XVI, matched to the phrase, "glory of the olive." And then there is the last pope in the prophecy, number 112. That would be Pope Francis, the current pope. If the prophecy is to be believed, we are now living in the end of days. Malachis' prophecy states that after the 112th Pope, the city of 7 hills, meaning Rome, will be destroyed. After that, the dreadful judge will evaluate his people, and the world will be ravaged by the apocalypse. Number 3. Secret Vatican Manuscript. About 800 years ago, a teenager named Laurentius Loricatus accidentally killed a man in Italy. He was so distraught about the murder that he fled to a cave in the wilderness and lived there for 34 years in solitude. Every day he whipped himself as a form of punishment for his sin. This bizarre medieval story was found written on a piece of parchment that was found stashed in the Vatican's secret archives. The parchment is about 16 feet, 5 meters long, and was put together by villagers who lived near Laurentius's cave. After his death, they petitioned the church for his sainthood. The villagers believed even though he was a murderer, he was so remorseful for his sin that he deserved to go down in history as a saint. The parchment detailing the story is covered in strange purple spots. For years, researchers have wondered what the spots really were and why they were all over the ancient manuscript. A team of curious Italian scientists recently undertook the task of figuring it out for themselves. After analyzing the parchment, they learned that it was made from goat skin and that the weird purple splotches were caused by salt brine. In the Middle Ages, parchment was not an easy thing to make. The goat skin was preserved in salt brine, then stretched, shaved, scraped, and sold. The parchment wouldn't have been salty anymore, but there were still bits of salty collagen on the material that quickly became home to bacterial colonies. Over time, moisture and changing temperatures caused the bacteria to turn into purple spots on the manuscript. While some dirty parchment isn't the most secretive thing from the Vatican, the tale of Laurentius, a confirmed murderer who nearly became a saint, isn't a story most people know. Number 2. Bones beneath the Vatican. In 1983, 15-year-old Emmanuella Orlando vanished in Vatican City. She had just finished up a music lesson and was on her way home when she seemingly vanished into thin air. In 2019, almost 30 years after Emmanuella went missing, authorities received an anonymous tip. The family was sent a mysterious image of a sculpture in the tomb of Princess Sophie von Hohenlohe. Included with the picture were simple instructions that said to look where the angel is pointing. This led investigators and Emmanuella's family to the Vatican's Teutonic Cemetery, at which point they discovered thousands of mysterious bones. These bones have nothing to do with the disappearance of the young girl, but they are a disturbing secret that's yet to be solved. The Teutonic Cemetery is located near the majestic St. Peter's Basilica, one of the most important basilicas in the world. It was originally reserved as a burial plot for Germanic Catholics, and this is where the investigators found 2 chambers filled with hundreds of bones, enough to represent several dozen people. According to what Emmanuella's brother told CNN, the Vatican does not want this information released to the public. He says there should be no recent bones buried anywhere in the Vatican, and yet underneath the floor are thousands of bones that could be anywhere from 500 to 5 years old. The Vatican vaguely indicated that the remains may have been lost during renovation work that was carried out in the nearby cemetery throughout the 1960s and 1970s. However, this explanation leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Unfortunately, after this immense collection of human remains was discovered, the story lost traction and vanished. It's been 3 years and we still have no clue who all those mysterious bones belonged to. Number 1. Pope Pius IX. The Papal States, which were officially known as the State of the Church, were a series of territories under the direct leadership of the Pope from between 756 and 1870. Pius IX was named Pope in 1846, and he was the very last Pope to rule the Papal States. This region covered much of what is now modern-day Italy, including Rome. It wasn't until unification in 1870 that Italy became a country, and the Vatican lost most of its land. During this time, there was no separation between church and state. This was a dark time in the Vatican's history, that they'd rather not have people talking about. Revolution was in the air, and people began to question the autocracy that had ruled over them for centuries. The most important priests in the Vatican begged Pope Pius IX to get with the times. They wanted him to become more liberal and to give people more freedom. They insisted that if the Pope made these changes, he could put an end to the rebellion, regain the trust of the people, and create an Italian federation that could be ruled by the Church. However, Pope Pius IX didn't listen to anyone. He wound up being dragged out of his palace and was exiled from Italy. When the Pope returned years later, the great territory he once ruled no longer existed, and he was confined to the Vatican like a prisoner. In the following years, popes refused to accept Italy as being a separate entity from the Church, and so they continued to hide in the Vatican until Mussolini took power in 1929. What is your favorite Vatican mystery? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.